Okay, I'm going to give a brief introduction here. Thanks everybody for jumping on this call. This meeting is being recorded. My name is Jared Sorensen. I'm a rancher in northeastern Nevada. My wife and I are raising our 9 children on a generational ranch. We're both third generation ranchers. We followed the traditional path of raising calves, putting out fertilizer. Didn't spray a lot of herbicides, but we were introduced to a different methodology about 18 years ago, and we decided that we would drop chemical spraying and synthetic fertilizer, and that we would go more of a natural route. And we were pursuing that for a while and having great degrees of success. And then I was invited to go to a conference down in Cedar City, Utah, and I signed up for a compost class. And when I got there, instead of talking about carbon and nitrogen ratios, they were talking about etheric forces and energy flow and all these terminology things that I'd never heard of. And when I came to realize that it was a biodynamic barrel compost making class. And so it really opened my eyes to the world of biodynamics. I'd never even, well, I did hear of it once from Nicole Masters from New Zealand. She mentioned it in a class, but it didn't even penetrate my thick skull because it was like, it seemed so far, so different than what I'd been doing. And so one of the presenters in that class was Lloyd Nelson, and we're privileged to be able to have him here with us today. And I've asked him to give this presentation and to record it so that we can spread this message throughout the world and spread the work of biodynamics to the 4 corners of the earth. And I think this is a fulfillment of that. And so we welcome all of you. I will be the kind of the facilitator here. If you have questions, we can enter those questions into the chat box. And so I might be a little bit multitasking here, fielding questions. The other thing at the end of the presentation, we can unmute everybody and we'll have the opportunity to be able to speak your questions directly to Lloyd for clarification. And so this is just an introduction. I'm trying not to get too bogged down into like the how to do things. You know, that would probably be for a further discussion, which we intend to do. This will just be a great overview, and we want to just really invite you to open your hearts, open your minds. One of the key things about life on this planet is to remember to breathe. So everybody, if you'll just take like 3 deep breaths, big deep inhale, expand your chest, and a big exhale. One more big inhale and a big exhale. One more deep breath, inhale and an exhale. So invite you to be present, to focus, to take notes, avoid the distractions, multitasking. Also, I think I can mute everybody, but maybe you guys can help me out and just mute yourselves because there's some background noises. So if you want to just hit the mute button, either on your phone or on your computer screen. And then again, if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box. So with that, Lloyd, let's begin.
Okay. Good morning, and thank you all for joining. And Jared, I really appreciate you having me come on this Zoom meeting and introduce this work to some of you. And I know some of these, you know, we have a very diverse crowd here. So some people are going to be working with, you know, 50 square feet, little small gardens, and some people are working with 50,000 acres and beyond. So I know we kind of, I would like to touch, you know, both both directions in this work. And I was introduced into biodynamics in 1996. And I met the man by the name of Hugh Courtney, who was teaching and making all the different biodynamic remedies and teaching a whole generation of how to do this work. So I live in Paonia, Colorado.
Sorry, Lloyd. I just accidentally muted you. Can you unmute yourself?
All right, sorry about that.
No,
so I live in Western Colorado. These are my cows, my steers. So you can see here, we live sort of really in this beautiful fruit growing region. And in the background, there's the Rocky Mountains. So we basically live where the Rocky Mountains meet the desert. And they call this little area the banana belt because of and we certainly cannot grow bananas here, but it is fruit. It's a big fruit growing region. So peaches, plums, cherries, apricots, pears, apples, nuts. It's a big region for that. And so there's also the largest concentration of organic farms here anywhere in a multi-state area. And there's more biodynamic farms here. And so I've been practicing the art of biodynamics now for a number of years in different applications, all the way from North Carolina, Virginia, East Coast, where it's moist and it rains, to out here in Colorado where it doesn't rain, or very rarely. I've lived in Hawaii and got to work on biodynamic farm out there. And in Canada, I've done some biodynamic projects. So I've kind of taken this work and tried to make it accessible to people. So now some of these concepts we're just gonna run through today because we don't have a lot of time, but I wanna introduce a few key concepts. And one of the things Jared wanted me to really touch on is growing, nutrient dense food. And so that's what, biodynamics is all about. There's this beautiful book that just came out. It's called The Death of Nutrition and the Resurrection of Humanity by Paul Emberson. And he died while writing this book, so it's not finished. But in there, it describes the process of why biodynamics was introduced to the world in the first place. But the reality that our food and the nutrition has gone so far in the negative direction that people, the health of the nation and the world is really at stake. And what biodynamics brings into your food is qualities of superior nutrition. And we do this through the energetic workings of these different biodynamic remedies. We have homeopathic remedies that we use. So there's 9 of those. So we'll get into those. There is the biodynamic planting calendar, which really puts us in touch with, and we're going to go into that, but with the heavens. So now we're going to kind of expand our consciousness, and biodynamics is about expanding our conscious mind and our attitudes into a great big living picture. And so even in this, the background, on a rare side, every now and again we'll get a rainbow, and if that's not a sign from heaven, I'm not sure what is. But it is the Rainbow Bridge, and it's a way to pay attention to something that God, Gaia, whatever that presence is in the greater sense, is active all around us, and we as humans can tap into the greater life force and energetic qualities that are have created the health and nature for all these years. And so now we've seen a degradation on massive scale of the food that we're eating. And so what we want to do is bring back this nutrition. So when we eat this food, we are again help to be connected with the source. So the third concept in biodynamics, besides the calendar, the preparations, is this idea of this as your farm as a living organism. And it's an entity on its own. So Jared's place is, it's a rather large farm. And Lance Hansen, we have Lance on the phone. He's got a certified biodynamic vineyard in outside of Hotchkiss, Colorado. He's doing beautiful work up there. And so he, he looks at his farm, his vineyard, his ranch as a complete entity. So what in biodynamics we consider, if you're starting to bring these fertilizers in from the outside, this is basically, you're bringing in medicine to heal a sick organism. So the idea in biodynamics, the ideal at least, and it's kind of hard to strive, to reach there, but you want to strive toward, is creating your fertility from on your land, from your animals, from your compost. And that brings the whole, the circle together. And and that's when the real transformation could happen. And so in biodynamics, we do use a lot of animal manures, and I've never seen such rejuvenation of land and pastures and health until we started running cows. So the cows are a big part of biodynamics. Let's see if we can go through some of these slides here. Of course, now my thing is not working. What the heck? Sorry about that. There we go. Oh, there's another one. That's and these beautiful, these Enzo, in this one talk we went to, he talked about, poor cows that have been polled or had their horns removed. They have to live with a headache their entire life. So in biodynamics in general, we like to leave the cow horns intact. So this is Dr. Rudolf Steiner, one of the most amazing, prolific authors of the last century. He wrote, numerous books, but he gave about 10,000 lectures in his lifetime. He traveled the world over giving these lectures, and it was all about a way for especially Western humanity to gain a new relationship with the spiritual world. Because, in Eastern, the philosophies, we've had the yogis, the saints, the gurus, the Buddhas, and in the Western humanity, we've kind of lost a lot of our connection with our spiritual connections. And so this work of Rudolf Steiner is pretty powerful. And in 1924, he gave this series of lectures called Agriculture, or the subtitle for this is The Spiritual Foundations for the Renewal of Agriculture. So there are certain foundational principles that we can work with to reconnect with the spiritual world. And now this is extremely important because, we have a chance at this point in humanity, we can continue down this path of degradation, or we can move forward in a process of evolution. So we're either going to evolve or devolve, but I don't think we can do, we can't do both. And so the process is pretty important right now. So this was during the First World War. This building was built in Dornach, Switzerland. And this was Rudolf Steiner's center for his work in the world. And this was a giant auditorium. This was the largest freestanding dome built since St. Peter's Cathedral. So the first time in modern history of reusing the concrete on such scale. There was no metal in this building, so it was all wood. In New Year's Eve, 1922-23, it was burned down by arsonists. So all this work was destroyed. And, then these guys were building this, they were listening to the bombs going off all around in the countries around them, and they could hear them from this site. So this is what's there now. It's a giant concrete building that will never burn down. But this is in Dornach, Switzerland. This is sort of the home of Rudolf Steiner's work in the world. So this is, so one of Steiner's impulses, of the many, many, including Waldorf education, anthroposophical medicine, architecture, philosophy, all sorts of spiritualized ideas, is this idea of bringing healing qualities into the food we grow. So he gave a series of indications of how to do that. And now this gentleman on the screen is my teacher. He died last June 15th. And this gentleman's name is Hugh Courtney, and he actually started the Josephine Porter Institute for Applied Biodynamics. That institute had trained a whole generation of prep makers, me included. And this gentleman had a real dedication to healing the earth. So his whole, in his whole mission, really, he ran a nonprofit. The whole mission was so that these agricultural preparations get applied so the earth may be healed. And so every year, this guy would make like 5,000 of these, these different biodynamic remedies, 5,000 horns in the ground, and 5,000, it was major scale. And, he instilled in a small group of us the seriousness of the situation of the time that we're in, the need to bring this biodynamic work forward, and the healing impulses it could have. So, honestly, it was like going to a school, Hogwarts, and we learned about, Harry Potter went to the school for witchcraft and wizardry, and not in the same sense, but this was like a modern form of learning from this guy, was learning a different way of relating to the world, and a different way of relating to the farm, a different way of fertilizations through energetic qualities that we could create. So this, I cannot tell you the inspiration this gentleman has on me, and has had, and continues to work. And it is a dedication to the Mother Earth. And so a lot of this, this work we're talking about is actually, you're going to have to take a little time out of your schedule to give back to Mother Earth. And that's really what it comes down to, is giving something back to the one who feeds us and takes care of us all. So I just got into all this kind of like what Lance would call the biodynamic woo-woo, a little bit out there. But I want to show you, this has real scientific backing. And these slides I'm getting ready to show right now is tests done through the USDA, the Department of Agriculture in the United States. And as we know, those guys kind of call the shots on large scale ag, and teach people what's what's good and what's not, and how to. So there has been this. So through the USDA, the NRCS, National Resource Conservation Service, is one of their organizations, and they've started doing these soil tests. So the slides that I'm showing you now are from the scientific tests from this new method that they've worked with that tests respiration of the soil. So it's actually how many microorganisms are living in the soil. It's the living component in your soil. So they're starting to test this breathing process. And so what we can see in these slides is, now we've done this 7 years in a row. So we have slide data from 2014 on the left to 2020. And you can see this uphill trend on most of these slides. And we can go to the next one and we'll see, this is a 40-acre pasture. Now, the interesting thing is, if you read about this kind of soil testing, this actually, what they say in the very beginning of this is not your conventional soil testing to tell you how much phosphorus you have or whatnot, but it actually will tell you, what's living in your soil. So what's important there is that it's showing you different types of management practices and how they affect the soil. So you can do a management practice of, no-till versus a chemical, and you can kind of see how much life is in the soil after that through this system. Well, what they found, it's, with this work we're doing at sustainable settings, and this is all on a certified biodynamic ranch farm that's our testing plot in Carbondale, is that there has been an extreme increase in the life. And you see these soil metrics, or the numbers on the left-hand side of the screen. They've actually had to raise those numbers a few times because the scale at sustainable settings keeps going up. So, scientifically proven, this is working, and this is 7 years of soil data, and we have this uphill trend. So even on, this one on the upper right-hand corner, you can see this is organic matter going from 4.9% to 6.3%. That's a huge increase. That would take, 3,000 or 4,000 years in nature for that sort of thing to happen. So this is real world work we're doing in testing and improving. I personally think this is extremely important that others can see this. And so to show that, this is working. And guess how much, the cost of what we're doing is extremely economical. I mean, we're probably putting in the neighborhood of, 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe $50 per acre per year in what would be the remedies, the biodynamic preparation. So, and all these things you can make yourself. So I'm not trying to be a salesman here either. I want you to take this home and try it. But these are things you can make on home with things that are on your farm or on your ranch. So let's dive right into that. Let's see. Well, this is a beautiful pizza oven I built this past spring. I want to just show you a picture because I just really love it. It was the client asked me to make this in the shape of a garlic clove. So it produces wonderful pizzas. But this, I started after learning more about sacred geometry and the sacred energetics of things, and everything I do now is those things are included. So even in this oven. So this is where we live, or where our ranch testing site is, sustainable settings in Carbondale. Colorado. And the beautiful thing about this is it's been an experiment and a playground almost for soil fertility and to see what works. You know, so one of the things my co-partner Brooke has done as, you know, he started this, and one of his project, this is 240 acres. Half of it's, you know, in ranch, in a farmable land, pastures or whatnot. His one of his key founding statements is, what are we as human beings capable of? You know, what are we capable of? You know, and if you limit yourself, you can limit your conceptions, but if you can expand your consciousness, you can do great things. And so all the soil tests have been taken at this farm. They have a raw milk dairy, CSA, meat shares, all these things. And this is where I teach most of my classes. And this is, like I said, it was an experiment. And so now they've tried everything from permaculture, no-till, keyline, you name it. We've tried all. And so our goal, take the best, leave the rest. So, you know, you take the best of what you can learn, the best of these practices. I'm not solely a biodynamic person. I think you still have to have, you know, really good farming practices, and biodynamics is like the icing on the cake. So we're just going to dive right in now to these different biodynamic preparations. And these are our remedies that we use for creating fertility and health on our farm. And as you can see, all of these, there's medicinal herbs. These are kind of, a lot of times they're called weeds. Yarrow, chamomile, stinging nettle, oak bark, dandelion, valerian, and equisetum, or the horsetail herb. So those are the herbal remedies we use. And then we have the manure, which is the cow manure, and silica quartz. So there's 9 preparations we're going to use. We make these. These were outlined in Steiner's agriculture course. And these are our homeopathic remedies to bring life into the soil. So these are all fairly easy to make. I mean, some of them are more complicated, and it's taken me a number of years to get to the point where I can do this. But luckily, everything except for the chamomile is growing wild here in my area. So these are, when we make these remedies, actually, they're going into the ground. So I made each one. Now, each one of these is also related to one of the planetary forces, so we can get into that later. But these are, so when we make these, you know, it takes a lot of work to do these, and sometimes you lose them. So now we're making these really nice markers to put in the ground. All right, so let's get into this, the horn manure preparation. So you can see the smiles. Smiles are important. Happy farm workers. This is the new way to make fertilizers, you all. You know, Steiner says it in the course about, you know, all this fooling around that goes on in chemical laboratories, you know, and how much investment and money goes into this versus this kind of fertility where we are out, you know, we're making this fertilizer, but this stuff works so well that we're outperforming every other farming system in Colorado, according to the NRCS, and maybe in the nation. So this is a whole new approach to fertilization. So we're taking these cow horns and we're stuffing them with manure. We're going to dig a hole. Now, I don't know if this will come through, but we'll try. This is a short video, and this is me making one of these horn pits. It's a little choppy, I'm sure. So these, the horn manure is buried over the winter. So we're taking cow manure in the fall, burying it, stuffing it in the cow horn, burying it over winter. And then we dig this up in the spring, and this is complete transformation that has happened in the ground, in the dark of winter, in the conditions that you would think were the opposite of when decomposition can happen. So each one of these horns now will, when it's finished, will have enough material to cover and to stimulate the soil life on about 2 acres. So one horn will cover about 2 acres worth of fields. Unless you start to homeopathically potentize them differently. So these are just different. I'm just showing you different layers of me making these here, and we're reusing these horns. This one, I think this was my latest one. So you can see in there, we have some brand new horns mixed with the older horns, and these horns we're able to use a number of years. So this is the horn pit we made at Jared Sorensen's place. And you can see this beautiful family getting ready for their photo. But we have, this is maybe the first horn pit in Nevada. And look at their soil there. It's already beautiful, black and deep. I know Jared dug these up, and I only dug 12 of them. So I don't know if he dug the other 12 yet or not. So these are going to get stirred up, and I'll explain that to you later, and then sprayed out. So this is my simple spraying mechanism. We'll go into more of that. And so what happens is we're taking this finished product and we're putting this into ideally, now how we turn this product into something that actually goes and affects the land is by energetically potentizing this in water. So we put this in water and stir it for 1 hour and then spray it out. And then the water becomes the carrier of all these energetic forces. So this is my setup. I have on the right-hand side, you see a copper vortex. You can actually see the water spinning in there at the top. But that stirs about 75 gallons at a time, and I can cover about 50 acres with this one tank. You see my sprayer on the left, and that hauls behind a pickup truck. It's a simple 2-inch Honda trash pump, so it never gets clogged up. I also have that the concrete mixer there. You see the orange thing? That is for mixing my manures, and I mix fertilizers in there, so it's dedicated solely to that. And you can see those IBC totes in the background. That's where you can make your different fermented teas and then, stir them and then spray that out. And then you're creating your own fertilizer, and then you're cutting out the, that salesman in the middle who's kind of taking a lot of the profit. And so in these horns is what's happened is something absolutely beautiful and exquisite over winter. And this is the transformation of this cow manure into this living humus that's full of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, and beneficial life. So these are the indigenous microorganisms from your land that we are actually growing in the cow horns. Now you can see the roots love to get in there. They love to get in there and feed on this. So we do clay, we put clay caps in the end of the horns when we do this. And so this is one of the horns after finishing. You can see the beautiful, this is a bloom of beneficial fungus here. And so these again are the indigenous, workers from your farm. So out in Nevada, you're going to be able to grow your indigenous microorganisms, which if you can propagate and then spray back out in the land, it's going to increase the whole overall health and vitality. And just by spraying this one preparation alone, works with everything below ground. So root growth, humus formation, topsoil, soil respiration, soil porosity, all that is increased by using this preparation. So this is really a great enhancement of the cow's energy. Worms love to get in there. Look at the size of that worm on the right. So this is what happens when, roots get in there, and you can see from this picture, see those tips of the roots at the very top? What happens if you pull this manure out of that cow horn, these roots have gotten in there and they go to the tip, right? And then they stop. They don't go in and turn around. They actually stop. So this is what I left in the ground too long. And if you could zoom in on that tip of that root mass, you'll see hundreds and hundreds and literally hundreds of root tips that all went into that horn. And they went to the bottom of that horn and they stayed there. They didn't go in and turn around. They didn't come back out. So what is happening in this cow horn is absolutely interesting. In one of the books, it's talked about how the cow horn is almost like the cochlea or the ear hammer in our ear. It's a listening device. So if you think about this being in the ground, and it's almost like able to collect all that energy of the earth, and those roots are going in there, and they get to that point, and they're almost like listening to what's in there. So anything that you actually put into these horns, that gets enhanced. So the cow horn is cow horn manure is our fertilizer for the soil and building everything, health and vitality in the soil. And there's another picture of those roots. And it just totally fascinates me that they go in and it's like they're more alive at the tip. There's so much energy in there that they don't just die off, but something is so profoundly happening inside those horns. This is what, when it's finished, I put these into a crock, an earthenware crock, and we store the finished product. So now this is pretty shitty looking here, but in biodynamics, we like to, Steiner says it in here, it's really important that we gain an intimate relationship with the manure. So this is actually, we are, now most people don't do this, but I saw they do this in India. India's in biodynamics is pretty large in India. I mean, there's huge scale over there. They believe in the sacredness of the cow and understand that. But they do stir their manure by hand a lot of times for an hour before they put it in the horn. So this is just another step of potentization and enhancing the energetic qualities. Okay, so next one we're going to get into is the opposite now of the horn manure. This is the horn silica. This is what is now, horn manure is working on everything in the earth, right? It's stimulating all that life below ground. Now the opposite of that is this horn silica, which now is going to raise the gesture into an upward flow of fertilization. And this one we use as an interesting concept, atmospheric fertilizer. So we are fertilizing the atmosphere around us, right? We are fertilizing the sky, the wind, the air that we breathe. We are bringing the light in. And now, you think about this, how much pollution is floating around the atmosphere. And, maybe even if you ever studied Wilhelm Reich's work, the negative thoughts and deeds, actions and attitudes in people, that all gets stuck in the air too. It's all kind of like all this great collective mass floating around. So the ideal that we can actually come in and do some interventions to bring healing and almost, again, open the gate to heaven. So this is what this does. This will bring the light in from the heaven into the plants. And so when we use this one, it's going to greatly stimulate soil or everything above ground. So photosynthesis, plant metabolism, keeping qualities. And if you're growing medicinal herbs and you want your essential oil content to go up, you will use this one. If you want your tastes and aromas, flavors and keeping qualities and enhanced, you will use this preparation. So we take quartz crystals and, now any mineral, most people would maybe call this, they might have some people have a hard time with this one because we're taking these beautiful quartz crystals. I mean, look at these are absolutely gorgeous. You have a couple different ones and we are going to crush these now. So this in this picture here, you see this big black metal bar there. That's actually a T-post pounder for pounding in metal T-posts. So flipped upside down. And then the thing on the top is a big pounding bar, tamping bar. And so we'll drop those crystals down into the metal here, and we'll crush those into a super fine powder. So fine, I think I got this mixed up here. Let's see. So fine that we're gonna actually make a paste. And so we once it's ground, you can see here, this is another enhancement. We're taking this one now when we're adding 24 karat gold to it to bring in further light processes. So this is bringing in the light. This is bringing in the sun's energy. Gold is the metal of the sun. So this is a further enhancement, but this is a way to bring in a whole nother quality of fertilization. And there's nothing better than walking around your farm and spraying gold fertilizer out. I mean, you will feel good, your plants will feel good, and it starts to change the activities. So we love that for this reason. So here we go. There's some beautiful, the quartz crystal's been ground. Now this is a picture of 12 different types of crystals. So, you can find quartz growing, that is on your land. And that's great to have that local quartz. But you could also bring, so we have in here, we'll have like amethyst and gem quality crystals. We'll have citrine and, we have a number of different types we're experimenting with. I think I have a picture of some of these. Here we go. So this is how we store it when it's finished. So here, anyways, this is 12 different types of minerals. Each one is crushed and placed in the horn and then marked so we know what's what when we dig them up. And so in here, we try to keep these all in the light. So you can see those mason jars all have the silica. And this one is an easy one to use. We're using this at the rate of about a teaspoon per acre. So it doesn't take much, but just as in, if you think about, this quartz crystal, this beautiful quartz crystal here, what's a microchip made out of? A microchip made out of thin silicon wafers, right? So this microchip, the silicon has this amazing ability to store information, tremendous amounts of information are stored on these thin silica wafers. So you can imagine, like when you're crushing these, how much information you can bring in. Now, if you think about this in another sense, the magnifying glass is silica. That's pure silica. And we know from the magnifying glass that we can greatly increase the sun's energy enough to even start a fire. So what we're doing with the horn, we're crushing these crystals and we're magnifying its energy. It's collecting the sun's energy because these are buried over the summer. And when we spray that out, it's spraying like a super dose of sun's energy, which will greatly increase the flavor, the nutrient quality of your produce. So this one is another, again, it's super easy to make. And when you have it, you know, you make a few horns of this, you'll probably have enough for your whole farm for the rest of your life. This is one that Brooke and I work with a lot and we're totally fascinated with. These are some of the trials we were doing in Nevada with working with some of the indications out of the Book of Mormon to take these preparations in a direction that would be appropriate for the folks who are working with that. So this is the horn silica. This is my favorite part about biodynamics is I get paid to make rainbows. That's great. But this is what we're looking at is you can see the peaches in the background. You can see the sprayer, and this is a boomless T-jet nozzle on the sprayer at the very bottom of your screen. And this will actually, instead of having big booms on your sprayer that go out 50 foot, this will cover a 50-foot wide area. So you can get in between orchards and tight spots without putting the boom out. So we want the silica to go up as an atmospheric fertilizer. And when this hits these peaches, now automatically overnight, the Brix levels are going to go up. The flavors will be increased, the smells. So just by driving through here and spraying this dose, now these plants are opened up to an energetic quality that's coming in from the heavens that will increase all your flavor, light, keeping quality, and all that. So very important to use these preparations on any of your foods to just help them, you know, increase their life-giving capacities. And, you know, with the nuclear radiation and other pollutions and, you know, 5G, and not to mention all the other Gs we don't even know about that they're testing out there. It's more important now than ever to really, you know, again, help to build this bridge from heaven to earth to be able to bring in this nutritional stream that is, you know, no longer available to, you know, most of the world. So those are the two spray preparations. It's the horn manure and the horn silica. Those are fertilizers for the earth and for the above the earth. The next 6 preparations could be used ideally on their own, but they're better off in a compost pile, or that's where they make their greatest enhancements. So we have 6 preparations for the compost pile: yarrow, chamomile, nettle, oak bark, dandelion, and valerian. Now these 6 preparations are used in a small amount, about a teaspoon per 15 tons of compost. So you're actually just making a remedy and you're just inserting it into the pile. We poke a hole, we put like a shovel handle and poke a hole down the pile, drop these in. And then the valerian, the 507, is sprayed on the top. And so what happens in your compost pile when you insert these preparations is actually quite dynamic and miraculous. First thing you're going to notice is the decomposition process is going to happen quicker. The second thing you're going to see is you're going to maintain a lot more of your nutrients, so the nitrogen is not escaping so easily, and all these other volatile oils and aromas and things are not escaping. The third thing you're going to notice too is this increase in beneficial bacteria, microbes, and fungi, and this really, you know, will change your compost. You know, in a large scale, they've proven this where they, you know, in these big composting operations where they had to go in and turn these piles numerous times to achieve a certain result. They found that if they actually added the compost preparations to it, they only had to turn it one time to achieve the same results. So that, you know, one set of these compost preparations for 15 tons, if you have to buy them, they're about $20 for the entire set. So it treats a large area. So the amount of fuel saved just, you know, in those turnings alone was so massive that the biodynamics made so much sense. So this will actually, if you want to produce superior compost, which is going to be your best fertilizer for your farm, you want to use these preparations. So we're going to get into these different preparations. Now, we're blessed here in Colorado to be able to go to 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12,000 feet to find some of these medicinal herbs growing. So here we are looking for the Equisetum and the yarrow. I'm just going to run through these because we don't have a huge amount of time. But this one is really our potassium fertilizer. So if we need potassium, we're going to use that one. Now, if we look at this cow stomach from this picture here, we have, the cows have 4 stomachs: the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. The cow is, for 8 hours a day, it's eating grass, and then 8 hours a day, it's regurgitating this grass and meditating and chewing on its cud, and 8 hours a day, it's resting. So this cow is all about digestion, and it's the only animal on the planet that actually gives out twice as much fertilizer as it takes in. So if the old saying, you can fertilize, the cow will take in off of 1 acre, but will fertilize 2, is pretty amazing, because when this grass is digested through the cow's process, it comes out so enlivened, and it still has a lot of forces left for growth, where a lot of the animals who, take it in, there might not be as much energetic forces left over. So
can you go back 2 slides there for
This
just
one.
a second, Lloyd?
Yep.
Okay, somebody asked if they could look at that. Do.
Sure. So potassium and a sulfur. So, a lot of people are using sulfur out there on their vineyards and stuff. And so you can use this one in its case. And so these are all specific, and what you're seeing there are all specific indications out of this agriculture course of what this preparation does. Now, yarrow is the great healer. It's the, as we know in medicine, you can, and the Greek god Achilles and whatnot, but this one is really used for healing of the land. And I know a lot of people have had farms who've had, abuse, whether it's been too much fertilizers or too much cultivation. And you can see it really out here where the farms have been cultivated too much, the soil gets so hardened. So by spraying this yarrow, it really helps to heal that.
Great, thanks, Lloyd.
Sure thing. Now, our next one we're going to get into is our chamomile preparation. So we're taking the chamomile blossoms. Now, chamomile is really working with our calcium, and we're looking for living calcium here. It also contains the sulfur. And this one is excellent. Now, if you think about chamomile, when do you drink a cup of chamomile tea? What happens? It relaxes you. I like drinking, if your stomach's hurting, you drink a cup of chamomile tea, it heals your digestion. So on your farm, a lot of, especially out here in the West, we have digestive issues. Our, plant matter doesn't really go back into the soil so much. It kind of stays there and doesn't digest. So if you spray chamomile, your soil will have this ability to digest so much better. It's kind of like a healing, soothing, and so these can all be used individually. So this one is really great, too, for stabilizing the nitrogen content and not allowing it to escape. The next one we're going to get into, and this is one of the more important ones, and even Rudolf Steiner says it does not deserve our customary scorn. And this is on the invasive weed list, I'm sure. But this is stinging nettle. And you can see, some of those lower leaves there, you can see the actual sting on there. And stinging nettle is so fascinating. It actually has this capacity of something like an insect. What is in a bee sting? What is in an ant sting? It's formic acid, oxalic acid. You know how much those stings hurt. Well, if you touch stinging nettle, this stinging nettle has those same things as those insects do, and it has the formic acid, it has oxalic acid. Incredible. So it's actually taken on this otherworldly quality, going into sort of this astral quality, and it's really beautiful stuff. This stuff has a huge amount of nitrogen. Are you able to mute that dog barking in the background? And so this is nettle that you can see here. This is nettle that's gone to flower at about, this is about 10,000 foot elevation. So we like to get the wild nettle. You can also cultivate this one, but this is, and you can use it when it's gone to flower. So we chop it up and we pound it really hard into these tiles. And then this is another version of it chopped up in brick pit, or here's another version we're trying in bags. I really like this method because it's the easiest way to recover the preparation. A lot of times you make these and you won't be able to recover them. And when it comes out, it's completely transformed. Here's another method where you can see it almost disappeared. But this, so yeah, the iron radiation, Steiner says this in the iron radiations in the nettle is similar to the iron in the human heart. And he says this one is the jack of all trades. And he actually says it's really important for us to be growing this plant near us. So this one, it's amazing fertilizer. If you had to just have one plant for fertilization for your whole season, you could grow this. You would have your nitrogen, you'd have all your macro and micro trace elements. You'd have, so this basically contains everything you need in a plant. So making a tea out of that, a ferment, is excellent. Okay, I'm going to try to move along because we have a lot to cover here still. So this is oak bark, and out here we have the gambrel oak that works. This is where we're looking for in this oak. It's the 505 preparation. We buried this for the summer. Now we're looking for living calcium. And so, when you spread lime or some other form of calcium, hydrated lime or whatnot on your land, it's actually you're spraying a mineral form. And so in biodynamics, we have this concept that we should keep things in the realm of the living. So all of our fertilization, this is a key concept in biodynamics, all of our fertilization should stay in the living realm. So if you have calcium from lime, it's in a dead mineral form. It's fine, it still works, but it's better to bring that into your compost pile, have it activated there, then it's a living, when it goes back out to your land, it'll be living form. So this oak in the calcium, the calcium in this oak is a living oak. So this is the one that is extremely important for plant diseases. Steiner says this is actually a universal remedy for plant diseases. So if you're having plant disease issues, this is your preparation. Let's see. The next one is a common weed, dandelion. And we like to pick these blossoms when they're young, when they first open, or before they first open. So if you've noticed if you ever watch a dandelion over a course of a few days, it'll come up and then it'll start to open and it'll close. And the next day it'll open a little bit more. The next day, and then like by day 4, it'll be fully open. So we like to catch them when they still have the bullseye in the middle. You can see by some of those pictures, they still have that sort of nice tight. Because if you get them there a little too late, they're going to go to seed after you pick them. So this is one of our preparation making days at sustainable settings with the different teas. This is our dandelion preparation before and after. Here's it going into the ground. And so this one is if you want to increase volume now and size, yield, this is your preparation to use. This one is definitely more related to the cosmic influences. And Steiner says, that the soils are losing their health because of their lack of silicic acid, and they no longer have this ability to reproduce. And so he says that this is the ideal form of silicic acid coming in from the dandelion preparations. So this is one of our more heavenly sort of preparations. And the last one of these compost preparations is the Valerian. This one is one of my favorites. This one you should all be growing again. Easy to grow. If you can't sleep, you take this one and it definitely will help you sleep. I guess later, Dave, this is what Valium has been derived from. So it does have these sort of interesting qualities. This is a Saturn gesture plant. So this is actually the plant we use for phosphorus. This is our phosphorus for fertilizer. And what is amazing, I have these soil tests that have shown on these different soil tests, but have proven that by using this at a small rate of it's like a dropper full, like a tincture dropper full, 21 drops per acre. It's a tiny amount, but stirred in water, that over in 1 year's time, we took the this is proven on soil test, unavailable phosphorus, like 0.4 parts per million. In one season, we took it to almost a high level of phosphorus, to 65 parts per million in availability. And that happened mainly through the use of this preparation. So this is used as a foliar spray. It's the pressed juice of the valerian flowers. And you can see in that top corner of the left, we are grinding them down in an old wheat juice grinder, or you can use a juicer. And we take that juice at the bottom and we let it ferment, and it gets a really nice, it's an interesting smell. But this preparation is also what we use a lot in the orchards for warmth. And this is Saturn's, this is like a Saturn energy. So that dandelion is Jupiter. Jupiter in astrology is what? It's the big planet, it's the planet of abundance. So it makes sense if you wanted Jupiter qualities in your field, if you want to increase your yields, you would use the dandelion preparation. If you want, a feminine healing energy, you would use the Venus preparation, which is the yarrow. So they all have, each one has a separate, use here. So we dilute this one, the Valerian, and this will prevent frost. Use this on fruit trees, because we have a lot of fruit trees in this area. So I spray some of the bigger orchards. And the last few years, we've had these late frosts, and the few orchards that I've sprayed had peaches, and most everybody didn't have peaches. So that's interesting. Okay, so this is going to be probably my favorite preparation to use to make. Does anybody recognize this plant? It grows a lot on the irrigation ditches out here where soil's been disturbed in sandy areas. This is Equisetum, or the horsetail plant. And horsetail is pretty much the oldest plant on the planet. It's talked about as, in one of the books, as a rock eater, and so it evolved as a rock eater. So if it's the oldest plant on the planet, it had to, because there was no other plants to eat, so it had to eat the rocks. So this one is actually, a descendant from what our coal mines out here were these giant Equisetum forests. And a lot of these seams, they grew up the size of, large trees, or even some people say the size of redwoods in the past. And these Equisetums are what caused our coal deposits. So this plant is so fascinating because it has more silica than any other plant on Earth. So if they burn this plant, and what's left over is a 90% silica ash, a skeleton. Basically, it's all silica. So this one is the living form of silica that we can use to increase health. What this does, the fascinating thing that they've researched, they found is this one, actually, you read about in most all the agricultural textbooks on biodynamics. And they talk about this one as an antifungal. You use it for blights, you use it for mildew, antifungal. But what actually the modern scientific testing through Dr. Lane Ingham and the Soil Food Web, they found that this one so greatly promotes the beneficial fungus and microorganisms on your land that they outcompete the detrimentals. So when they say it's an antifungal, it's because it's a super stimulant for the beneficials. So this is like a probiotic for your soil. So you're going to go harvest this one. You can wildcraft this one. It grows for free everywhere around here. I found some up in Idaho recently growing in a creek when I was up there, and they hadn't seen it. But so I know it grows. I don't know if Jared, if you have this around you yet, if you've been able to find it. But this plant is probably my favorite fertilizer. I use this one in pretty much all my sprays. I would make a tea of this. You ferment it. It'll last for the whole season. You can make big batches of it, like in a 50-gallon drum or a 280-gallon tote, and you can just have it whenever you need it. But this plant brings in the healing qualities par excellence, like none other. So if you think about this too, what we're doing with this plant is actually building up its silica framework, or it's almost like our bone structure is calcium, and in the plants it's a silica structure. And so this is giving a strengthening to the plants like none other. So this one is so easy. Here's it growing. I think this is actually a picture I took up in the Pacific Northwest, so you can see it grows much bigger out there. Okay, I do want to make time for the question and answers. So I want to breeze through some of these other things here. We got storage. So our storage is very important with these preparations. We keep them. You can see this is peat moss. So peat moss is actually will allow these energetic qualities that these preparations make when you make these. That sort of holds them in and contains them. Doesn't allow them to disperse. So we keep them in this nice peat moss. You know, there's that great story of when they found the guy in the peat bog that died, and there was a, you know, cult, it was a murder. They couldn't figure, but then they realized the guy had died about 100 years ago, and the peat so well preserved his body that you know, there wasn't much decomposition that happened. So then we use this peat to hold all these qualities in. So even the lids on these boxes are about 4 inches thick with a peat pillow built into it. So let's go quickly into this remedy. This is one we made with Jared Sorensen in his place. This is a really easy, simple method to make super high powered compost that is the sort of your base of getting your biodynamic program started. So we have the traditional recipe is 12.5 gallons of manure, 100 grams of eggshells. So I use about I think I use a cup of eggshells and a quart of basalt rock powder, and 1 set of the compost preparations: yarrow, chamomile, nettle, oak bark, dandelion, valerian. We stir that manure up. And then you can see here on the bottom, there's our compost preparations getting ready to go in, but I have these brick pits that I make this in. So I've had some really good results. Here's another picture of it halfway through. So we're adding another set of the compost preparations. Put some jute mesh on there to help keep it moist. And you can see after I introducing these beneficials, I started having these mushrooms growing out of it. Beautiful, beneficial microorganisms from our land. And that to me is one of the best achievements I've had making the barrel compost. And you can see this growth of all these digestive mushrooms on there. And this is what you want to see. You know, this is what we're doing is now we have this cow manure that's normally just being plopped down in the land and decomposes slowly, but now we're increasing this greatly so we can, you know, have a basis for life. So when you spray this out, so the barrel compost is used like rescue remedy in biodynamics. It's used for drought, too much rain, insect damage, hail, if you need a fertilizer, if you got too much sunshine, anything, you know, it's like our all-around remedy. And so I'm just going to run through a different few pit designs because we've been doing experiments because, you know, the original one was made with wine barrels, but and that recipe came up after, you know, when they were testing all these nuclear bombs in the atmosphere, and biodynamic folks back in the 1945s wanted some kind of remedy to prevent all this nuclear radiation from getting into their fields and getting into their plants and eventually their food. So they used this remedy and it worked really good. Here's another pit, it's round. Here's what happens if you leave your barrel compost in the ground too long. You can see those roots just love it. Here's has a pit made with stone. Here's a barrel compost pit made with basalt rock. So these are all different ones we're experimenting with. This is one in older picture from Kentucky, but this is a large scale hog farm operation with several thousand hogs, and he's doing it conventional and biodynamic. And this gentleman, he's storing this is his storage containers. This gentleman has found that if you use the barrel compost in his pig feed, that he can actually get the pH of the pigs to go up higher. If you know, like, a lot of people don't like to eat pork because it has such a low pH. So this is actually a great enhancement to the health, and you can raise the pH of the meat by using this barrel compost, and super helps their digestive system. And you can get that back in the land, and that starts creating a whole full cycle of fertility. This is my little small prep company I made with Brooke. It's called Biodynamic Source, and we have all the different remedies we make. And we try to do these as ethically sourced as possible. So everything we get, from the cow to the animal parts to the flowers, we're harvesting in high elevation, and we try to do a really good work with this. And we try to so some of the people, these preparations are being used across the United States and into Mexico and Canada. People are having great results with it. This is a copper, so we're going to just quickly get into the stirring and how do we get these out there to the world. This is a copper stirring machine that I made. This is out in a farm now in Fireborough, California, on a certified biodynamic farm. And it's just run with hydraulics. It holds about 80 gallons of water. And you can see in there, I've embossed in the copper, the different zodiac constellations. And that's just, it's again to keep our eyes on the bigger picture of what's going on with the heavens around us. And so it's kind of a reminder of, there's a lot more going on Earth than what we want to reduce it down to. Here's a gentleman out in California who is working in ways to enliven his water. So this is his irrigation water that's going out to that vineyard out there, or the orchard you can see in the background. And he built, basically built the overall shape with forms, and then he had poured concrete, and then he has these different waterways that spinning. And so we know, like, hurricane, the toilet flushing, this movement of the spiraling of the galaxies, the planet, everything moves in these spirals. And so if you put this water in motion, these spirals, it becomes enlivened. You think about a tornado or a hurricane, or all that action, that movement. So this is a beautiful way to enhance the health of your water. This is gentleman also made, I'm just showing you some advanced biodynamic stuff real quick because I just loved his work when I saw him. But this is a simple vortex that he's got created through these large tubes that are about a foot in diameter and probably about 6 or 8 foot tall. And he's got water coming in. And so every water that he's putting out on his land is energetically enhanced. So we got here, this is some of his stirring towers. And you can see the scale of them. And so this guy is producing some of the most high quality fruit in all of California. And it's because he's using these biodynamic remedies and he's enhancing his water. So enhancing the water is so important. Here's one of his, he's got a giant egg in the ground with a giant stirring tower. So here's just another one of it. I wanted to show you these because they're so darn cool. Okay, let's get into this. Well, I want to save some time for Q&A, but I want to get through this point real quick. So I'm going to just run through you on the biodynamic planting calendar, the importance of it and why we use it. So the first heavenly body we get to from the earth is the moon. So, in a lot of, it's important to pay attention to the lunar rhythms. Those are kind of sort of the first places to pay attention. Full moon, new moon, ascending and descending, all those things. And so Steiner has a couple things. He says if you plant your seeds 2 to 3 days before the full moon, you'll have the best results. And you can see that as the moon, gets bigger every day, the tides rise, the water in the earth is moving. So it makes sense that those seeds are going to germinate. So that's a very important time in the calendar. And there's everybody knows that you've had times with good results with the biodynamics, and you probably have not had good results with or maybe just with planting seeds, And so sometimes there's stuff like eclipses that happen, and eclipses are actually energetically blocking a certain force from coming in. So in this case, with this lunar eclipse, you can see that it's blocking the shadow of the sun. So the sun's energy is not be able to make it to the earth. And if you plant seeds at that time, your seeds are going to get diseased. You're going to have, you are going to have insect attacks almost every single time. So there's really good times to plant. There's okay times to plant. There's, the decent times, and then there's like times you really shouldn't. So let's go through this concept real quick because I want to leave a little time for Q&A. So there's 4 main elements of the ancient times: earth, air, fire, water. Those 4 elements are related to 4 different organs of the plant. So the earthly element is related to the root. You can think about that in, if you want to plant potatoes, you're going to work with earth, or carrots, anything in the earth. Lettuce, kale, collard, any of those leafy elements, you're going to work with water. Any flowers you're trying to grow, you're going to work with the airy element more. And then fruit and seed is fire. And you can think about that as like the summer sun energy collecting in the fruits and the sweetness of the ripening. Now, if we look at that from here, we can see that these constellations of the zodiac, there's different, we have 12 constellations of the zodiac. There's the 4 different elements. And so 3 of the constellations in the zodiac are related to these different elements. And when you put it all together, it looks like this. So there's a whole sort of this heavenly conception of these qualities that are coming in. And I'm sure everybody on this call probably has met a Taurus, someone who's born with sun and moon in Taurus, or, and they have this certain personality traits, or a Sagittarius, or, you can, and so, these all have qualities. Well, they also have qualities in plant growth, and these are to pay attention to. So we have these 4 different ones. Now, real quick, the outer conception of this is that we're using a zodiac on the outside circle, not the inside circle. So the inside circle is your traditional tropical zodiac that you've seen in, with your newspaper astrology. But that was set down, those timings and were set down over 2,000 years ago. And now, because there's this thing called the precession of the equinoxes, we're actually moving 1 degree every 72 years. The zodiac is shifting. So it takes like 25,000 years some odd to go through one whole cycle, of this shifting. But now we're almost a whole zodiac sign off. And so these are the actual, like if you were looking at NASA, the NASA website, what's going on in stars, this is the outer circle that we're paying attention. It's like, what is the real-time star action now? Where are the stars? So they've moved. So some of these constellations are bigger than others, as you can see. And if you can look at this image, you see that something like Libra, which is on the top sort of right-hand corner of your screen, it's taking up only 21 degrees of the zodiac. If you look kind of down the size of the star constellation in the sky, wherever you see right next to that, Virgo is taking up 40 degrees or more, 46 degrees of the sky. And you can see that that's actually how big that constellation is in that region of the sky. So they've done all these experimentations through a number of years. We don't have time to get into this. So here, let's just quick look at this. These are the different constellations on your left, the signs. That next column is the planets. These are the signs of the planets. And then we have the different aspects, whether they're in conjunction or opposition, whatnot. And this is all based on this beautiful biodynamic planting calendar, Maria Thun and her work, where she planted seeds for like 50 years, every hour on the hour. It found out these rhythms. All right, let's just jump into this. So this is our calendar. I highly recommend people use this one. I like this calendar. This is going to help you out a lot. We're going to run through this. So where are we at? February 9th, Tuesday, February 9th. So if you look at that, we have it's going to tell us first the constellation of the moon that we're in, and then we're going to go into the sun, and then what element. So you can see today, for this morning, it's a fruit period until 6 p.m., and then we go into a root period after 7. So if I was going to work with something today, I would like to work with my fruit plants, my tomatoes, my fruit trees, something like that. I would rather not work with my root plants today because that is not being enhanced. But tomorrow or tonight and tomorrow is much more an enhancement of the roots. So we have these kind of periods where it goes through, the moon's moving through an earth constellation and then to a flower constellation and to a flower and then a fruit, and it repeats the cycle over and over. So it's about 2 to 3 days in each one of these constellations. So when I'm looking at this map, I look at this colorful column and I say, yes, I want to work with my leafy plants. I want to sow my lettuce seeds. If I sow my lettuce seeds on a fruit day, what's going to happen? More than likely, that lettuce is going to shoot up to seed really quickly instead of staying in this nice lettuce form. If you plant your lettuce on a leaf day, it's going to have a nice leafy effect. So I want to look down on that screen. I see on the 27th of February is the full moon at 3 a.m. Okay, so I know that is a time. I always like to plant before the full moon. Steiner said 2 to 3 or 4 days before the full moon, you're going to get your best germination. I found he's absolutely right. So then I will look at those few days before the full moon on the 27th, and I will see I got flower day there. So any of my flowers I want to seed, my cosmos or echinacea or something, 22nd and the 23rd, I'll do that. On the 24th and 25th, I will work with my leaf. So I'll sow like collards and kale and anything that's leafy. And then I'll wait till like that Thursday evening to start my tomatoes, anything like that. And you'll see a great enhancement from this. So I just wanted to kind of go through these dates real quick. We got the full moon on the 28th of March. So I'm going to say that week of the 21st through the 27th of March are going to be excellent, excellent times to plant. If you look to that far right-hand corner, you're going to see the planetary aspects. And I know we don't have time to go into that, but those are, you can see the 21st through the 27th, there are like 6 oppositions, which are super beneficial, and 1 conjunction, which is not as good. So I'm also going to look at these planetary aspects, but I would say this full week around the 21st through the, say, 27th March, excellent time to plant. So when you're in your greenhouse, if you were to do this randomly, You pick the March 2nd. You see that day, 2nd and 3rd, it's blacked out. Why is it blacked out? Because there is an unfavorable heavenly constellation. If you plant your seeds then, what's going to happen is you're going to get disease, insects, bugs, and it's not going to be as good. So this is all about just, getting your timing right, enhancing the qualities. And the heavens, this has been scientifically proven. This really works. Whether we want to pay attention to the greater, picture of things, it's up to us. I'm just going to run through the year real quick. April, we have because I know people are going to be planting again. So these next months. And so again, that full moon is at 11 p.m. on the 26th, Monday, the 26th of April. So if I look at that week before, I do see like 2 days in there that are blacked out. So I'd want to avoid that. But the 18th, 19th, 20, like excellent days for planting things. And then also that Friday, the 23rd, 24th. So we will be doing a whole class on this. I want to take your question and answer, so I'm just going to breeze through these. Now I want to show you something interesting. If you can look in this column, it's might be hard to see here, but you can see those on the 3rd of June. There's a triangle. There's a moon, a brown and a yellow triangle, right? And you can see down there on the 23rd, there's also a yellow triangle. So that means that there are planets that are in here. So if we look back to, we'd have like 2 planets that are either, in the Earth would be Taurus and say Capricorn. So we have 2 planets that are exactly in those positions that we're seeing on this first trine. And what happens is it's super enhanced that day, that earthly energy. So anytime you see those triangles in this calendar, you know that is a super good day for Earth. If you see a yellow triangle, you're going to see a good day for flower. So now if we went through here, we can see in May, we have 1 trine on the 21st, or that's March. April, we have an Earth trine. May, we have an Earth 2 Earth trines. June. Now we get into August. Now this happened last year. You see that on the 3rd, the 20th, and the 22nd are 3 red triangles. Those are fire trines. That means there's planetary energies lined up in the fire signs. So whenever we have a lot of planets in fire signs, we're going to it's going to be, the fire energy is going to be increased. So last August, when I saw the calendar of last August, I actually started crying well before it ever even happened. I saw the planets were so fiery last year that the fire energy was going to be so intense. And it sure was. It panned out to be a really tough year. All those California fires and the droughts, very significant. Luckily, this August and September are going to be hot again, but there's some balancing forces. Last year was all fire. At least this year we have some earthly energy. And September is a very busy month in those. So here, I want to run through a couple of these things. Here, I'll come back to the slide. Well, maybe I'll just leave that up actually. But I want to take some. We have some courses coming up. This is in Carbondale. March 6th is our tree course. March 1st is the Biodynamics 101, and then we have 2 big preparation making intensive days in June and September where you make all these and teach people how to do it. And we've talked to Jared about coming out to Wells, Nevada in early April to come teach. So there's a couple websites there for further information. Biodynamicsource.org. That's where we make all the preparations. We have them available. And then Sustainable Settings is the farm I work with out of Carbondale in Colorado with Brooke, and that's where we have it's like a big learning center, and all the classes are held there, and that's where we make all the preps. Biodynamics.org is the National Biodynamic Association. It's good to check them out. And if you want to send me any questions or you want to get a hold of me, contact me at lloydrnelson@gmail. And at this time, I want to open it up for questions. And yeah, Jared, what do we got?
Awesome. Why don't we give Lloyd a big round of applause virtually? That was awesome. Thank you. A lot of information, but very timely. Thank you sincerely. So let's one of the questions that I remember from the chat was, is there a control plot at the sustainable settings to be able to do kind of a true trial where we have areas that aren't being treated biodynamically?
Well, I mean, so everything, what we started doing now is broad scale applications. And so even at when we went to Jared's place on 50,000 acres, it was broad scale. We're not touching everything with it, but our intention is to make this work over this large scale. So no, and for instance, there's not control plots, but the thing it is, they are doing 60 farms in Colorado with the same test. So the control is amongst all the farming, all the operations that they're testing. And we've by far outperformed every single one in all of Colorado. And then I think across the United States, there's about 60 farms in this test in each state. And I think we've outperformed every farm there. So yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I can speak to that too, that I was at a soil health workshop when they presented that data, and they said this is kind of the new top of the line test. It's the Haney test, the respiration test, and definitely sustainable settings was the outlier. It was the one that they didn't understand what they were doing from the chemical mindset, but it definitely stood out. And so what we're trying to do is to replicate that on larger scales. Let's see if anybody else has questions. You can go ahead and unmute and just chime in. One is it best if you need to buy preparations that you match your land qualities with where you are buying? So do you want to buy preparations locally, or is it okay to have your preps shipped across the world, Lloyd?
That's a good question. So my teacher, Hugh Courtney, that picture I showed you at the beginning, he says he always had a thing. Ideally, yeah, you would be making your preparations on your farm, and then ideally maybe you would get them somewhere locally. But he said the reality is I've made these in Virginia. I ship them all over the planet, and they work everywhere they go. So I think they do work. I think what we're doing here in Western Colorado with these preparations is specifically more oriented towards the desert Southwest, because because that's our region. So it's been challenging to make the preps here and make them good. But I do think if you were to get preps more local, the better. Ideally, if you're near like Jared, he's got the cows, you would get them from there. But but the interesting thing is, yes, we get results no matter, people from Mexico calls up and say, wow, these things really work here too. So it's interesting. It goes both ways.
Yeah, very good. Have you been successful in introducing wild prep plants to farms and ranches?
I would say the most success we've had, yes, because we pretty much collect all of our plants wildly except for the chamomile. So pretty much everything we've done is from wild plants, and yeah, some of that's cultivated. I think so. Those are they still have an amazing energetic quality of the wild stuff that's sort of been taken away when we cultivate. So I think it's really good to use the wild plants. And yeah, you can bring them in from, if you can go dig up some yarrow or nettle from somewhere else, and easy to import.
Yeah. And I think once you start looking for them and you ask around, you find what you're looking for. So
that's a good point.
Do you speak a little bit about the containment vessels for the preparations, the crocks, and other ways that you store the preps?
Sure. So the mainly we have the earthly preps, which want to be stored in a just the main thing is the conditions, root cellar like quality. So cool, maybe moist, maybe away from like electromagnetism, away from the wires, away from where you're storing the gas cans, and the earthenware crocks are the best, I think. I know in like Australia they use they use these old washing machine because they're big copper bins. But yeah, so the main thing is just keep them nice and cool, and then in an area that's just uncontaminated. So these are like so pure when they're done that they want to just kind of be protected and held. And then so the silica, though, this is the main one we hang up we put it in the summer sun or in the window. You saw that one picture of the silica being in the windowsill there. So those are all stored there. Storage is important, and one of the things we found that definitely they can be enhanced in storage. Like, because sometimes it's not always, you don't always get a beautiful preparation. Maybe it took me a number of years to start producing really quality preparations. So the storage, it's an area where things can still happen and progress. And if anybody comes out to Carbondale, we'll take you to our root cellar storage. It's a really beautiful site.
Then another question about applying yarrow to my garden, and that's also leads into, is it best to just apply the preps alone, or can you combine them?
That's a great question. I think, I'm all about the combinations. I think some traditionalists will tell you that they're better off, only used, but I feel like it's like a concerto, and you may have, the horn manure maybe like your tuba or your bass, and it's really this broad base for the earth, and then like if you use the silica on it, maybe that might be like the flutes and the clarinet session. So you have these different parts, and so yes, using them on their own, it could be very beautiful solo, but the combination is important. So yeah, spraying them on your garden, like if you have certain issues, like you just need a healing impulse, like yarrow would be beautiful just to spray by itself. So there are some certain combinations that are, like Equisetum kind of goes with everything. So Equisetum and yarrow together, Equisetum and horn manure, Equisetum and horn silica. The barrel compost goes with most everything too, so that's sort of an all around. So we made this one product. I don't have it here. This one is our Buffalo soil activator. Yeah. And it contains all of the preparations. So we kind of came up with an easy to use form. That one, I should recommend this book to you guys, Quantum Agriculture by Hugh Lovell. This guy died recently. He's another one of my teachers who just died. So all these teachers died. So it's time for me to step it up anyway. So I'm really glad to be on here with you. But this book is amazing. And in here, it's about he's a biodynamic guy, but he talks about, in quantum physics, we can understand that idea that, what the observer and the phenomenon are intricately linked. So if we want to observe something on our farm, you probably can. If you don't want to observe it, so if you want to observe these things working, they probably will. And if you don't, you won't. So maybe there's with the new science of quantum physics, it's really interesting in how these things are actually working.
It's awesome. Awesome. Anybody else?
This is a good book here, Culture and Horticulture, for the whole philosophy of it. Highly recommended, by Wolf Storrell. Excellent book for the in-depth.
Would you be willing to share your slides, Lloyd, if somebody emailed you? Are they proprietary? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I'd be willing to share them.
Okay. There was a lot of information there.
Yeah, there was a lot. I kind of dumped on you guys. So.
That was a great overview, and that's kind of, I feel like, what we needed. There's people here from all around the world, and it's great to see that there's this much interest. And so start somewhere. You may not have it all figured out, but just start. This might be the very start of it. Try to collaborate with other people that have already been doing it, learn from them. And I think what Lloyd said is really true. If you believe it'll work, it will. If you really doubt and you want to disprove that it won't work, well, you can prove that too. But I think, especially in the world that we live in, with the degree of contaminants that we're dealing with, it's an idea whose time has come. It only took it about 100 years. Let's see. Have you tried making preps with other herbs that have similar properties?
Ooh. That's a great question. That was the goal of Steiner said, you need to, if one of these or other doesn't grow near you, you should use a suitable substitute. So people are always we're trying to figure out what those suitable substitutes are. But says one plant you probably cannot change out, and that's stinging nettle, because the qualities it has in it are so unique. And so he says stinging nettle is the jack of all trades and is a master of all, basically. So it is the one we don't really want to find a substitute for. But certainly, like in Hawaii, when I lived out there, you had to find different herbs because some of these didn't grow. So Casuarina equisetifolia is the ironwood tree, but equisetifolia, is the botanical name. It's so interesting. It looks like a giant equisetum plant, and so there are definitely equivalents. And so that's important work still. It's a study.
Yeah. I think well said. We should probably cut it off here. I'll give you one more chance to kind of give some parting words, Lloyd, but I can say from going and spending days with Lloyd and his partner Brooke that it's some of the best time spent learning to heal the earth. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity or make the opportunity to come and do something on site. I think it's great to learn from books. It's great to learn virtually from these opportunities and the world that we live in. It's what a blessing that it can reach different parts of the world. But this is a unique opportunity to be able to come and learn either at sustainable settings or at our place. We've also just constructed a huge Wallapini style greenhouse, which is harvesting a lot of the thermal energy in the earth. So we're able to grow things in a very harsh environment year round. And so we're applying biodynamics on the ranch, on the small scale in our garden and our greenhouse, but on a large scale on thousands of acres on the ranch. And just being able to see it in action, I think is a great way to learn. So reach out to Lloyd and plug into something. Another thing that we've talked about doing, and maybe we can give some thought and respond back, like what would you want more in depth on if we were to do something else virtually. I mean, we can't necessarily stir the preps, but maybe what we could do is when we're here on site, we can have somebody with a camera and we can make some chunks or some segments of while we're actually going, and they can be participating via Zoom and asking questions so that, those that are in Malaysia or Mexico can jump on. So if you have specific things that you want to learn more about from Lloyd, chime in, send him an email and say, hey, this is what we'd be interested in learning in. Is there anything on Facebook that they can plug into, Lloyd? Like
there's the biodynamic community, which is a pretty good, there's a lot of stuff being posted there and a lot of information. And then, yeah, I definitely would check out the Biodynamic Association for their work.
Okay. Any last words?
Yeah, Lloyd and Jerome, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, hi, this is Lance Hansen with Jack Rabbit Hill Farm in Hotchkiss. And Jerome, it sounds like you've done some research on the Haney testing as well. And so my question to both of you is there any published material? I think this Haney story is super powerful. And, I'm wondering, have they published any of their findings on the tests that they did and the cohort that, sustainable settings was included in, and the results and sort of the comparative results between the different farms, ranches they tested?
Lance?
Yes.
They just posted on a press release wire, and I got an alert from it for something I follow on Google, that NRCS did just publish the research. They didn't say what the properties were, but they did announce the number of data, that the data for what they've been studying since 2004 on X number of farms in California and nationally are starting to prove conservation efforts for carbon sequestration. So I actually put it on the BD Facebook group page this morning. And so you could probably just look up the contact and try to get a little bit more specific information than what they put in their press release.
Would
Okay,
you
could
mind
you-
sharing? Sorry, would you mind sharing that link? I'm not on Facebook, and I'd really like to see that.
Oh, you know what I can do? Lloyd, do you have everybody's email addresses that are on this call?
I think Jared had, I think you should,
Or
Jared,
Jared?
you can answer that question. I don't think he has. that.
Well, I'm not very good at technology, so I didn't have an email gathering system.
Okay,
I put it out there.
unfortunately, I'm on Zoom via my phone because my kiddos got my computer. So I'm trying to think how I can get this to you all. How about this? I'll give you my email address. You guys can email me and then I'll send out the link that I got from Google this morning. How does that work?
That's perfect, Victoria. Thank you very much for.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. No, it was totally random that I caught it. That it
Nothing
came
random.
through. So cool.
It was inspiration.
Let's try, how do I do this? Share
So
content.
if you just type into the chat box your.
I know, I'm on my phone though, so I don't see the chat box. Hold on, there we go.
you can-
So, Jared, can you talk a little bit about your ranch and the scale, the scale of your sort of biodynamic activity there?
Yes, just briefly, and we'll probably do another one where Brooke will show some of the trials. If you look at my YouTube, which I still am on YouTube, don't curse me. I've got a YouTube channel and there's a little trial on there. So the channel is Regeneration. If you search for that, maybe I'll try to pull up the link here in just a second while Lloyd's talking. But anyway, there's an interview with Brooke, Lloyd's partner, about what we did on our ranch, and it has video and still pictures of kind of what we're doing on a large scale. So we started with about 400 acres of irrigated, flood irrigated meadows, and then we did some other trials on larger tracts of land. And so we're just, each year we keep expanding based on the results that we're seeing. The thing that we are seeing is increased earthworms. We're seeing drought resistance. We went through a pretty severe drought last year, but yet our hay harvest was above average, even in a drought condition. We are doing some, we haven't implemented the Haney test yet, but we are doing soil sampling, and we're watching our soil organic matter and seeing how it is increasing. We deal with some pretty harsh soils here, high pH, high alkalinity, pretty tough growing conditions, coupled with very brittle environment. And so the ability to, we've been doing compost tea for several years, but the ability to do that on uplands and the scale that we're at is just not feasible. So that's where biodynamics comes in, because it's a small amount and you don't have to cover every square inch. So just a brief overview, that's what we're seeing, but we can show pictures of us actually applying and stirring and putting the preps out in another class.
And so you've sounds like you've applied the preps to at least 400 or 500 acres. Is that correct?
Yes, directly onto those 400 irrigated acres. And then also we've done some experiments, some kind of crazy things. Lloyd and I did a stir right in the ground with the intention to treat a 320 acre dry land piece. And that felt pretty neat when we did that. And so we're just monitoring the results. Again, because of the environment we live in, sometimes those results are not necessarily phenomenal. They're not earth shattering because we live in a dry, harsh environment.
Yeah.
But yet, we have to start the healing process somewhere.
But you're seeing you're seeing results. You're seeing a difference in what you're doing.
We are. Yeah, we are seeing that, both from the health of the livestock, from the health of the soil, the increased clovers and diversity. We still have weeds, but that's, everything has a place. It's just trying to keep things in balance.
Well, I think that it's biodynamics on your scale. What you're doing, this is huge. This is great for the movement, and between you and Brooke and Lloyd, you got to get the word out, right, to other large scale ranches and farms around the country, because I think this is a huge opportunity. And I'm curious, how are your neighbors? I mean, have you shared this, what you're doing with other, neighbor ranches and farms, and are they as, I don't know what the right word I want to use is, but are they as open to these approaches, and are they curious? How are they responding to what you're doing?
We're the village idiot. Really, we do weird things, and there's a lot that I don't tell my neighbors because because we haven't sprayed for years, and so it's so far outside of the traditional industrial mindset that we've been ingrained and taught in schools, and still is mainstream thought processes that nobody's a prophet in their hometown, they say. And so really my outreach is more across state lines, and maybe even a little bit into Central and South America.
Right.
That being said, I mean, there are some who ask what we do. Most of the time I talk more about what Brooke calls the horizontal. So they can kind of begin to understand the compost tea, putting out microbes and minerals, even though that's a pretty big stretch. But when you start talking about energetic and homeopathic treatments, for example, my dad, 86 years old, he was in the greenhouse the other day when we stirred preps and put them out. That was something really new and really different for him. And so it was good for me because it pushed me to try to explain it. And we actually recorded that. And that's the other thing. William, our partner on the greenhouse, who manages the greenhouse, he will have a video out of us actually putting those preps out in the greenhouse. So that's kind of our journey. It's so different, yet it shouldn't be weird. It's just a different way of doing things.
Well, it's not. I mean, it's not at all weird if you're seeing a positive result from it. And I think what Brooke and Lloyd have done on the consulting front of this is absolutely tremendous. And I wish at some point there's some way to formalize, in some document, some paper, something, what you're doing, Jared, with them, because I think this is one of the tangents that the BD movement has to go in. Large scale commercial operations. There's huge opportunity there, I think, but we need the case studies. We need the documented results and real good stuff without all the woo woo in the report. Although I get it, the woo woo is important, but I think I'm more probably like your dad. I have trouble with the energetics and that side of it, but I know it works from my own humble limited experience. So great job, and thanks for hosting this conference.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate your contributions. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on here. I'm just really humbled by the response that we got and the diversity of people who've been on here. I wish we had time to just open up the line and say, everybody chime in from where you're at and tell us your story. Unfortunately, we don't. So we'll just conclude with Lloyd, just sharing any last remarks that you have, and then I'll go ahead and stop the recording.
Great. Well, I think, I always, you think about weird sometimes, and then you look back at I always find it exceptionally weird that people are able to see the skull and crossbones and say, this is poison, and read the poison, this is poison, this will cause cancer, and they still use that on their fields. So that's, most chemicals you see nowadays has those warning stamps, but people are weird enough to still say that this is a good idea to use on my farm and on my animals and my plants that I'm going to eat. So what I feel like, this is what has come to is this is our opportunity to restore health and vitality of your farm. Economically, the preparations are all things you can make on your own. You can buy them for inexpensive. You can, start to practice. These are empowerment tools. These will help you to take back your power on your farm, to take back the vitality, to take back your health, to take back the something that we've given away to the fertilizer salesman. To give, if you fertilize with nitrogen, you're basically, like Brooke says, you're giving the plants the whole year off. They just suck on a straw of nitrogen. They don't have to work. So we want our plants to work. We want our plants to be smart. We want our farm to be smart. We want to transform the earth. And, the idea that we're all just here and exploiting, taking out, from the earth every time we're growing a crop and producing, the idea to give back in a simple way to the healing of the earth, to the mother, to Gaia, to the one who sustains and provides all life on this planet, to take time out of our busy schedule to be able to stir and to do this work is so profound because, you are awakening a consciousness on your land, on your farm, in your soils, in your plants, and in your families. When you eat this food that is will change the dynamics on your life, of your place, of your gardens and what's happening. And the idea that you can bring in new nutrition and powerful nutrition from even a earthly, but maybe even a heavenly source, to open your mind and your consciousness that more is coming in. I mean, it's easy for us to pray and say, God, please this or that, and oh heaven, I can't wait to make it to heaven. I hope I don't go to hell. But these things like heaven exists. These stars are around us. There is so much coming in from this greater picture, and it's time for us to pay attention. It's time for us to not just go with the status quo, to branch out, to experiment, to not just be like normal human beings stuck in this existence, but to expand our consciousness to the greatness of the greater power that we can achieve with health and vitality and land through using these different remedies to create, the new heaven on earth. And that's the goal. And we can do this without, breaking the family's budget in their wallets and breaking the farm, but actually to be able to create the health, the new vitality is some of the most important work we can do. So I really, really appreciate you all joining me in this. And Jared, I especially appreciate you having given me the opportunity to do this. And for just so you guys know, this is my very first Zoom presentation I've ever done. So luckily I've had enough chances to see other people work on it to get to the point where I was able to do this. But I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join me and Jared in this work. And,
you did great, Lloyd.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Yep, very good. Lloyd,
Yeah. You're doing great.
Lloyd
Thank
talks
you.
about resurrection agriculture, and I think that really, really sums up what biodynamics is about. So everyone, thank you.